A newly retired doctor from Maplewood told his wife he needed a solo hike to think about his big life change and set off for Pine Mountain, but he never came home, leaving his loving wife wondering what happened. The case went cold with investigators, thinking he either took his own life or had a bad accident. But 4 years later, hikers exploring the wilderness downstream found something shocking stuck in a beaver dam, evidence that would prove his wife's gut feeling was right all along. Emily's hands shook as she cracked eggs into the pan, the morning sun streaming through her kitchen window, showing the distant outline of Pine Mountain. 4 years. For 4 years since David kissed her goodbye that morning, promised to be back by dinner, and vanished into the wilderness he loved. The eggs sizzled, but her mind was stuck, lost in the pain of not knowing. The loud ring of the phone startled her, making her drop the spatula. She checked the caller ID, Pine Mountain National Park. Her heart raced. They hadn't called in over 2 years. Mrs. Emily Carter? The ranger's voice was kind but serious. This is Ranger Tom Wilson from Pine Mountain National Park. We need you to come to the station. Some hikers found a backpack in a beaver dam yesterday, and we traced it through the GPS tracker's serial number. It belongs to your husband, David. The words hit her hard. She gripped the counter, her knuckles white. A backpack, after all. This time? Yes, ma'am, can you come to the ranger station? We have questions, and the police are here. Emily's mind spun as she drove the familiar road to the ranger station, her hands trembling on the wheel. Every turn brought memories. This was the route they'd driven together so many times. David always excited for another adventure, always promising to be careful. She trusted his experience, his careful ways. He'd hiked these trails for 30 years. The ranger station parking lot had 2 police cars next to the usual park trucks. Emily's stomach twisted as she walked in, the smell of pine and old wood bringing back more memories. Ranger Wilson, a sturdy man in his 40s, greeted her with kind eyes. Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming. This is Detective Harper from the County Sheriff's Office. Detective Harper, a tall woman with grey hair tied back tightly, shook her hand. I'm sorry we're meeting like this. Please sit. They took her to a small room where David's muddy, torn backpack sat on a table. Emily's breath stopped. She knew it right away, the grey and blue pack she'd given him for his 60th birthday, with the red clip he always hooked on the side. The hikers found it stuck in a beaver dam about 8 miles downstream from Crystal Falls, Ranger Wilson explained. It was buried in branches and mud. We traced it through the GPS device's serial number. Detective Harper opened a folder. Mrs. Carter, we recovered the memory card from the GPS. The antenna was broken, so we couldn't track it during our searches over the years, but the memory card kept data from before it got damaged. Emily leaned forward, hope and fear fighting in her chest. What did it show? The data shows your husband went off the trail on purpose that day. The last signal came from a spot far from any marked path, about here. The detective pointed to a map, her finger on a remote part of the wilderness. We searched those coordinates again yesterday and this morning. Found nothing, but David never went off trail, Emily said. He was so careful about safety. He filed his hiking plans, stayed on marked paths. In 30 years, he never once went off his planned route. Detective Harper's face stayed calm. The GPS data is clear. He was miles from where he said he'd be hiking. With this evidence and the remote spot, we're looking at 2 possibilities, suicide or an accident. Suicide, Emily's voice broke. David had just retired. We had plans a cruise to Alaska, visiting our grandkids in Oregon. He was excited about spending more time together. I understand this is hard, the detective said, her voice softening a bit. But after 4 years, with animals and weather, there'd be little left to find. We won't reopen the case. The search of those coordinates found nothing, and there's nothing more we can do. Emily felt trapped. You're giving up, just like that? We're not giving up, Mrs. Carter. We're being realistic. Your husband went off trail to a dangerous area, whether on purpose or by mistake. The outcome is the same. The case stays closed. Through her tears, Emily looked at the backpack's contents with Ranger Wilson. David's medical license was in a plastic holder, warped but readable David James Carter, MD. The photo showed his kind eyes behind glasses, that gentle smile she missed so much. His hiking permit, dated October 15th 4 years ago, the ink faded but clear. His phone, the screen cracked and filled with murky water, totally ruined. The strange thing, Ranger Wilson said quietly, glancing at the detective who'd stepped out for a call, is where we found this. The Beaver Dam is miles downstream from any marked trail. For the pack to end up there, your husband had to be somewhere way off his planned route. The water flow suggests it traveled far. Emily stared at the ruined items, her mind refusing to believe what they meant. David always stuck to planned paths. He'd check weather reports 3 times before leaving, carried extra batteries, emergency supplies. He was careful about safety. It's what made him a great doctor. This didn't make sense. The ranger's face was kind. Sometimes even experienced hikers mess up, Mrs. Carter. Or sometimes people didn't want to be found, but Emily knew better. David would never leave her alone like that, not after 40 years of marriage, not after promising they'd spend every day of retirement together. He'd been counting down the days, marking them off on his office calendar with a red marker, excited like a kid before Christmas. As she left the station, holding a bag with copies of the permits and a receipt for the backpack, they were keeping it as evidence, though evidence of what? She didn't know Emily felt more lost than she had in for years. The official word was clear. David went off trail and met with either an accident or on purpose. Case closed. But nothing felt like closure. Emily sat in her car outside the police station for several minutes, gripping the wheel until her knuckles hurt. The morning had gone from a normal breakfast to a life-changing discovery. She needed to tell someone who knew David, who understood what kind of man he was. His old co-workers deserved to know about the backpack. The drive to Maplewood Medical. Associates took her through downtown, past the coffee shop where David used to grab his black coffee and blueberry muffin every morning, past the park where they'd celebrated his retirement party, his co-workers surprising him with a cake shaped like Pine Mountain. The memories were everywhere, impossible to escape. The practice looked different now. The familiar blue awning was gone, replaced with modern grey, the sign updated with fancy lettering. Emily pushed through the glass doors into a waiting room she barely recognised. Gone were the cosy chairs and warm colours David had wanted. Everything was stark white and chrome now. "Can I help you?" The young receptionist looked up from her computer, no recognition in her eyes. "I'm Emily Carter. My husband, Dr. David Carter, used to work here. I need to speak with someone about a development." The receptionist's eyebrows furrowed. "I'm sorry, I don't know that name. I've only been here 18 months. Could I speak with the office manager?" A few minutes later, a tired-looking man in his 30s appeared. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Brandon Lee, the current office manager. I'm afraid I didn't know your husband. The practice was sold 2 years ago, and most of the staff changed. But Sarah Thompson still works here. She was here during Dr. Carter's time. Sarah's still here." Emily felt a wave of relief. Sarah had been David's favourite nurse, skilled and caring, someone he trusted completely. "She's with a patient right now, but she should be free in about 20 minutes. You can wait in the break room if you'd like. It's more private than out here." The break room hadn't changed much. Emily sat at the familiar round table where David used to eat lunch, always making sure to include any staff who seemed lonely or stressed. 23 minutes later, Sarah rushed in, her face full of concern the moment she saw Emily. "Emily, oh my goodness, how are you?" Sarah hugged her warmly, then pulled back to look at her. "Is everything okay? You look upset." Emily's words spilled out the backpack, the GPS data, the police's conclusions. Sarah listened closely, her face growing more worried with each detail. "They found it in a beaver dam after all this time." Sarah sank into the chair across from Emily. "I can't believe it. We still miss him so much here. Well, those of us who are left anyway. The police think he went off trail on purpose. They're saying suicide or that he got lost," Emily said, her voice catching. "But you knew David. He would never." "Never." Sarah nodded firmly. "Emily, your husband loved his work, loved his patients. His retirement shocked us all because he seemed so passionate right up until the end. The patients loved him. Mrs. Yamamrudra still asks about him every time she comes in." Emily leaned forward. "The GPS showed him miles from any marked trail. The police think that proves he wanted to disappear. But David was so careful about hiking safety." Sarah's expression changed slightly, something flickering in her eyes. She glanced at the door, then back to Emily. "You know, now that you mention it, David did seem different that final week." "Different how?" "Anxious. Distracted. He kept checking his phone constantly, which wasn't like him at all. During procedures, he was still completely focused. He'd never mess up patient care, but between appointments, he seemed worried. Emily's pulse quickened. Did he say anything? I asked him during lunch break on that Wednesday. I remember specifically because he was sitting right where you are now, and his sandwich was untouched. That wasn't like David, he always ate a lot. I asked if he was okay, if retirement nerves were getting to him. He gave me this forced smile and said he had a lot to wrap up before retirement. That sounds normal enough. It wasn't what he said, Emily. It was how he said it. His hands were shaking slightly when he picked up his coffee cup. In 15 years of working with him through emergency surgeries and tough diagnoses, I'd never seen David's hands shake. The break room suddenly felt smaller, the fluorescent lights too bright. Was there anything else unusual that week? Sarah stood and quietly closed the break room door, then sat back down, her voice dropping to a whisper. This is probably nothing, and I've never told anyone before, but Dr. Wilson's behavior that week was strange. Wilson, Emily pictured David's boss, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and an easy smile. They'd had dinner together several times over the years, Wilson and his wife Patricia joining them for celebrations and holiday parties. He wouldn't let anyone help with David's patient transitions. Usually, when a doctor leaves, the whole team helps transfer files, update records, reassign patients. It's a huge job. But Wilson insisted on handling everything himself. Maybe he wanted to make sure everything was done right? Sarah shook her head. Confirmatory sentences like "that's what I thought at first," or speculative ones like "maybe he wanted" to personally ensure continuity of care are redundant and have been removed for simplicity while maintaining the original meaning and length. Wilson was here until midnight several nights that week. I know because I forgot my car keys one evening and came back around 11 o'clock. His office light was still on, and I could see boxes and boxes of files. The strange thing is, he took them all home instead of storing them in our records room. Emily felt a chill. David never mentioned Wilson acting oddly. That's the thing. Wilson was perfectly normal during the day, cheerful, supportive, throwing David that amazing retirement party. But after hours, Sarah trailed off, shaking her head. I'm probably reading too much into it. Grief makes us look for answers where there aren't any. You said Wilson took the files home. Were they ever returned? I honestly don't know. By the time I thought to ask, the practice had been sold. Wilson made a fortune on that sale from what I heard. He opened a new, much bigger practice across town, fancy equipment, multiple specialties. He's doing very well. Emily remembered Wilson's modest practice from before, nice but not flashy. That seems like a big jump. He's got investors now apparently. There was an article in a medical journal about his new billing practices and management style. He's speaking at conferences about making more money in healthcare. Sarah's tone had a hint of disapproval. Very different from the Wilson who used to say patient care came first. The break room door opened and Brandon peeked in. Sarah, your 2 o'clock is here. Sarah squeezed Emily's hands. I'm so sorry about the backpack. If you need anything at all, please call me. She paused at the door. Emily, I know the police have their theories, but I knew David. Whatever happened on that mountain, it wasn't because he wanted to leave you. He talked about your retirement plans all the time, the Alaska cruise, teaching your grandson to fish. He was counting down the days. After Sarah left, Emily sat alone in the break room for a few more minutes, thinking about what she'd learned. David anxious and distracted, Wilson working late, taking files home, the successful practice sale and expansion, none of it proved anything, but combined with the GPS data showing David far off trail, it felt wrong. She thought about all those dinners with Wilson and Patricia, the easy laughter, the old stories from medical school. Wilson had given a beautiful speech at David's memorial service, talking about integrity and dedication. He'd held Emily while she cried, promised to help any way he could. But now Sarah's words echoed, very unusual for a boss to do the grunt work. What had happened in David's final week? What had made his steady hands shake? Emily gathered her purse and left the break room, nodding goodbye to the receptionist, who was already focused on other tasks, other lives moving forward, while hers stayed stuck 4 years in the past. But now, for the first time, she wondered if the past held secrets she'd never suspected. Emily's hands were dusty and her back ached from bending over boxes, but she couldn't stop searching. The storage unit smelled of mothballs and old paper, afternoon sunlight slanting through the small window, lighting up dancing dust. After Sarah's words, she needed to look through David's things with fresh eyes. She'd kept everything from his home office, every file, every notebook, every receipt. At the time, she'd been too heartbroken to sort through it, just boxing it all up with the vague idea that someday she'd be strong enough to face it. Now, 4 years later, the day had come with a sense of urgency. The first 3 boxes held nothing unusual: medical journals, patient thank you cards from decades, certificates of continuing education. Emily smiled through tears at a crayon drawing from a young patient, carefully kept in a plastic sleeve. Dr. David is the best. In the 4th box, wedged between 2 thick medical journals, she found David's leather day planner from his final months. Her breath caught. He'd always been old-fashioned about scheduling, preferring pen and paper to digital calendars. She flipped to October, her fingers shaking as she found the week he disappeared. Monday, October 12th, staff meeting 7:00 a.m, Johnson's surgery 9:00 a.m, lunch with Emily, Tuscany's, 1:00 p.m. Tuesday, October 13th, round 6:30 a.m, clinic until 5, retirement party 6:00 p.m. Wednesday, October 14th, Patterson and Associates, 2:00 p.m, evening review files. Thursday, October 15th, meeting with Wilson, trail parking lot 7:00 a.m. Emily stared at the entry, her mind racing. October 15th, the day David disappeared. He'd told her he was hiking alone, needed time to clear his head about retirement, to process the big life change. She remembered his exact words over breakfast: just need a day with the mountain. Emily, you know how it centers me. But here, in his careful handwriting, was proof of a planned meeting with Wilson at the trail parking lot at 7:00 a.m, exactly when David had left the house that morning. Why had he lied to her? She flipped back to Wednesday's entry, Patterson and Associates. The name seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Digging deeper into the box, she found a manila folder labeled October receipts in David's neat writing. Inside, clipped together, were 3 receipts from Patterson and Associates. The letterhead explained what her memory couldn't: employment law specialists, protecting workers' rights since 1987. Employment law? David had never mentioned any work issues needing legal help. The receipts showed consultations on October 7th and 10th, with a 3rd appointment set for October 16th, the day after he disappeared. Emily pulled out her phone, thankful the storage unit had decent signal. The law office answered on the 2nd ring. Patterson and Associates, how may I direct your call? This is Emily Carter. My husband, David Carter, was a client 4 years ago. I'm calling about some receipts I found. One moment, please. The hold music was calm, then, Mrs. Carter, I'm transferring you to Miranda Dalton. She handles our records retention. Another wait, then a professional female voice. Mrs. Carter, I see here that Dr. David Carter had consultations with Mr. Patterson in October 4 years ago. How can I help you? I'm trying to understand why my husband needed an employment attorney. He never mentioned any issues at work. There was a pause. I'm limited in what I can share, due to attorney-client privilege, even after his passing. But I can tell you, Doctor, Carter's initial inquiry was about employment whistleblower protections. Emily's mouth went dry. Whistleblower protections? Yes, he specifically asked about protection from retaliation and how to properly document evidence of workplace issues. He was scheduled for a follow-up on October 16th, but never showed. Mr. Patterson tried calling several times. The secretary's voice softened. I remember when we heard about his disappearance. Mr. Patterson was quite concerned. He said Dr. Carter sounded very worried during their last conversation, kept asking if his family would be protected if he came forward with information. Protected from what? I'm sorry, I can't share more details. But Mrs. Carter, your husband was very careful in his approach. Whatever he was dealing with, he wanted to handle it properly through legal channels. Emily thanked her and hung up, her mind spinning. Whistleblower protections, evidence documentation, protection from retaliation, and a meeting with Wilson the morning he disappeared, a meeting he'd hidden from her. She loaded the most important boxes into her car, including the day planner and receipts. The drive home felt unreal, her quiet neighborhood looking the same as it had that morning, yet everything had changed. David hadn't just gone hiking, he'd gone to meet Wilson about something serious enough to need legal advice. As she turned onto her street, Emily, Noticed the silver Mercedes in her driveway right away. Dr. Wilson's car. She'd recognized that custom license plate anywhere, Gila 1. Her pulse raced as she pulled up behind it, seeing Wilson standing by her front door, talking lively with her neighbor, Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Lee spotted her first, waving excitedly. "Emily, I was just telling Dr. Wilson you were out. He's been waiting for you." Wilson turned, his familiar smile in place, but Emily noticed something new, a tightness around his eyes, a tension in his shoulders. He wore an expensive suit, as always, but his tie was slightly crooked, odd for the usually perfect man. "Emily," he said warmly, approaching her car, "I heard about the backpack. The police contacted me this morning to let me know, asked a few routine questions since I was David's employer. I wanted to check on you, see how you're handling this news." Emily got out of her car slowly, very aware of the boxes visible in her back seat. "That's kind of you, James. It's been a tough morning." Mrs. Lee, never missing a chance for gossip, chimed in. "I told Dr. Wilson you'd gone to your storage unit spring cleaning, I assumed, though it's October." She laughed at her own comment. Emily saw it then, a flash of something in Wilson's eyes when Mrs. Lee mentioned the storage unit. His smile stayed, but it wavered for a moment, like a flickering light bulb. "Storage unit?" Wilson asked, casually, but his voice had an edge Emily had never heard before. "Sorting through old things, just some of David's belongings," Emily replied carefully. "The police returning his backpack made me want to reconnect with his memory." Wilson nodded, looking sympathetic, but his eyes kept darting to her car. Of course. Grief takes us all differently. Find anything interesting? Sometimes, going through old things can bring unexpected comfort or surprises. The question felt heavy, like it carried hidden meaning Emily couldn't quite understand. Mrs. Lee kept talking about her own late husband's belongings, but Wilson wasn't listening. His attention was locked on Emily with an intensity that made her uneasy. "Just memories," Emily said. "If you'll excuse me, James, it's been a long day." "Of course." Wilson stepped aside but added, "If you need anything, Emily, anything at all, please call. David was very important to me. I'd hate for his legacy to be tarnished by misunderstandings." The word hung between them, misunderstandings. Emily, forced a smile, nodded, and walked to her front door on shaky legs. She could feel Wilson's eyes on her back, could sense him noticing the boxes in her car. Only after she was inside, door locked, did she lean against the wall and take a trembling breath. Wilson's visit, so soon after the police contacted him, felt like more than a coincidence. His interest in what she'd found in storage, the way his calm slipped when Mrs. Lee mentioned where she'd been, and that odd comment about David's legacy and misunderstandings. Emily peeked through her front window. Wilson was still there, now back at his car but not leaving, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand moving sharply as he spoke, nothing like the calm, collected doctor she'd known for 15 years, or thought she'd known. The day planner sat in her purse, that single entry burning in her mind. Meeting with Wilson, trail parking lot, 7 o'clock AM. What had David discovered that needed whistleblower protection? What had he planned to tell Wilson that morning? And why was Wilson so curious about what she might have found in storage? Emily had barely settled inside when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Wilson still on her doorstep, his expression now one of gentle concern. She thought about not answering, but something told her that would only make him more persistent. She opened the door partway. "Emily, I'm sorry to bother you again," Wilson said, his voice soft and kind. "I was about to leave when I realized how abrupt I must have seemed. This news about David's backpack has shaken me too. I was wondering, would you like to get coffee? Sometimes it helps to talk with someone who knew him well, who understands what a special man he was." Every instinct screamed caution, but Emily saw a chance. If Wilson was involved in whatever had troubled David, maybe she could learn something. "I suppose a cup of coffee would be nice," she said carefully. "Wonderful. How about Corner Coffee on Main? I remember David saying it was your favorite spot. That would be fine. I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. I'll drive." Wilson offered quickly. "No sense taking 2 cars. No, I'll drive myself," Emily said firmly. "I have errands to run afterward." Something flickered in Wilson's eyes, but he nodded. "Of course. I'll see you there." Emily closed the door and pulled out her phone, texting her sister Ellen, "Meeting Dr. Wilson at Corner Coffee on Main. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call police." She paused, then added, "Not joking." Ellen's reply was instant. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "We'll explain later. Just please keep an eye on the time." The drive to Corner Coffee took only 10 minutes, but Emily used every second to calm her nerves. She parked where her car was visible from the window and chose a table in the busy main area, not the quiet back corner Wilson suggested. "You remembered," Emily said as Wilson returned with their drinks, a vanilla latte for her, black coffee for him. "David talked about you constantly," Wilson said, sitting down. "Vanilla lattes, hiking at sunrise, your grandsons, little league games. He was devoted to you." The words should have felt nice, but something in Wilson's tone made them seem like he was testing her. Emily took a sip of her latte and waited. "This must be so hard," Wilson continued. "The not knowing for years, and now this discovery. Have you had time to process it all?" "I'm managing," Emily said carefully. Wilson leaned forward, his face kind. "Going through David's things must be emotional, all those memories stored away. Did you find much in storage? Sometimes people keep things they never mention to their spouses, work documents, for instance." There it was. Emily kept her face neutral. "Mostly medical journals and patient thank you cards. David saved every drawing a child ever gave him." "How like him," Wilson smiled, but his fingers started tapping the table. "No work files?" "He was always so careful about documentation. I'd imagine he kept copies of important paperwork." "Just the usual," Emily said vaguely. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason. It's just that when the police called this morning, they asked if David had taken any patient files home, HIPAA violations, you understand. I assured them David would never do such a thing, but I wanted to make sure for his reputation's sake." Emily noticed a slight sweat on Wilson's forehead, despite the coffee shop's cool air. "The police asked about patient files? Standard questions, I'm sure." Wilson's fingers tapped faster. "They also asked about his state of mind those final weeks. I told them what I observed, of course. Did you happen to find any personal writings, journals? Sometimes people facing big life changes write things down." "David wasn't much of a journal keeper," Emily said, watching Wilson's jaw tighten slightly. "No? How about appointment books? He always carried that leather planner." Wilson's attempt at casual interest was failing. His voice had an edge. Emily made a choice. "Actually, I did find his day planner." Wilson's fingers stopped tapping. "Oh yes, it was interesting looking at his final week, all those appointments wrapping up his practice." She paused, watching Wilson's face closely. "There was an entry on October 15th that confused me." October 15th. Wilson's voice was steady, but his knuckles widened where he gripped his coffee cup. He'd written, "Meeting with Wilson, trail parking lot, 7 a.m., but he told me he was hiking alone that morning." The change in Wilson's face was instant. The kind mask broke, replaced by something Emily had never seen before, calculation mixed with barely controlled panic. "Oh, that," Wilson said, his laugh forced and hollow. "Poor David. He was so confused that morning. Actually, he called me around 6:30, sounding upset. He was worried about his mental state, said retirement was hitting him harder than expected. I tried to talk him out of hiking, suggested we meet to discuss his concerns, but he insisted he needed time alone on the mountain." Emily stared at him, this man she'd known for 15 years, watching him build lies as easily as breathing. "David called you?" "Yes, very early. Patricia can confirm the phone woke us both. He sounded unwell, talking about pressure, about things he couldn't handle. I offered to meet him to help, but he became almost paranoid, said he needed to think." Wilson leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Emily, I didn't want to burden you with this, but David had been showing signs of depression for weeks. The retirement transition was devastating for him." "Depression?" Emily's voice was sharp with disbelief. "David was excited about retirement. He had plans, trips mapped out. Sometimes people hide their true feelings, even from those closest to them," Wilson said smoothly. "As a physician, he would have known how to mask the symptoms. That confusion about our meeting, writing it down when it was just a phone call, that's typical of someone under severe stress." But Emily knew better. She'd seen that day planner entry. David's handwriting was firm, precise, not the shaky letters of a man in distress. And David had never lied to her, not once in 40 years. If he'd spoken to Wilson that morning, he would have mentioned it. "I should go," Emily said, standing suddenly. Wilson stood too quickly, his coffee cup rattling against the saucer. Emily, wait. If you found anything else, any documents that might be misinterpreted, I hope you'll let me know. For David's sake. David's reputation doesn't need protecting, Emily said coldly. Excuse me. She walked out steadily, but she could feel Wilson's eyes on her back. In the window's reflection, she saw him standing frozen by their table, his coffee cup trembling in his hand. The man who had given David's eulogy, who had praised his integrity and dedication, who had promised to help her through her grief, that man was gone. In his place stood someone Emily didn't recognize, someone whose made-up story about David's mental state was so clearly false it made her stomach turn. David hadn't been depressed. He hadn't been confused. He'd had an appointment with Wilson that morning, and Wilson was desperate to hide why. Emily's hands shook as she pushed through the restroom door. The normal sounds of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of customers felt unreal against the pounding of her heart. She locked herself in the farthest stall and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Emily kept her voice to a whisper. I'm at Corner Coffee on Main Street. I'm with someone who I believe may be dangerous. Please send someone. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I don't know. Maybe. His name is Dr. James Wilson. He's asking questions about my deceased husband and acting erratically. I'm scared. We'll send a unit to check on you. Can you safely stay where you are? I have to go back out there or he'll get suspicious. Please hurry. Emily ended the call, splashed cold water on her face, practiced a calm expression in the mirror, and walked back out, hoping she looked normal. The sight that greeted her made her stomach drop. Wilson had moved to her side of the booth, blocking her exit. His coffee sat abandoned across the table. There you are, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. I was starting to worry. Emily forced herself to slide into the booth, pressed against the wall. Sorry, I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed by everything today. Understandable. Wilson's tone had changed, the fake sympathy replaced by something harder. You know, I drove past your house this morning on my way to the hospital. Early, around 6 o'clock. Noticed you had boxes out by the curb. Spring cleaning in October? Emily's mouth went dry. There had been no boxes by her curb. Don't lie to me, Emily. The words cut through the coffee shop. Noise, sharp and cold. I saw you loading boxes into your car at the storage unit. Mrs. Lee was quite chatty about your activities. I should go, Emily said, trying to slide past him. Wilson didn't move. What did you find? Nothing, just memories. Like I said, Emily's voice came out higher than she meant. David kept copies of everything, didn't he? Always so thorough, so self-righteous. The last words came out like a hiss. Emily pushed harder against him. I need to leave. My sister is expecting me. For a moment, Wilson didn't move. Then, slowly, he stood. Of course. Let me walk you to your car. It wasn't a request. Wilson's hand was on her elbow, his grip tight as he guided her toward the exit. Emily scanned the coffee shop, hoping to catch someone's eye, but everyone was caught up in their own conversations, their own lives. The October air hit her face as they stepped outside, bringing a new level of fear. The parking lot was nearly empty, her car parked in the far corner where she'd thought it would be visible from the window. Now that distance felt like miles. Where are they? Wilson's voice had lost all friendliness. Where are what? His grip tightened painfully. The documents, the files, whatever David kept. I know he made copies. I don't know what you're talking about. Wilson spun her around, slamming her back against her car. Don't play stupid with me. David was going to ruin everything with his self-righteous attitude. 40 years of building a practice, creating jobs, helping people, and he wanted to destroy it all over some numbers on a spreadsheet. James, you're hurting me. Where are the files? He shook her, his face inches from hers. Did you give them to the police? The FBI? Who else knows? Emily tried to pull away, but Wilson was stronger than his silver hair suggested. Let go of me. People saw us leave together. If anything happens to me, that's when she saw the gun. Wilson pulled it from inside his jacket in one smooth motion, pressing it against her ribs. The metal was cold through her thin sweater. Get in my car. James, please get in the car. He shoved her toward his Mercedes, the gun hidden between their bodies but clearly there. Move. Emily's legs felt weak. You don't have to do this. Whatever happened with David, shut up. Wilson opened the passenger door, using his body to hide the gun from any passers-by. Get in, or I'll shoot you right here. Emily looked around desperately. A woman walked past on the sidewalk, glued to her phone. No one was coming to help. "Please," she whispered as Wilson pushed her into the seat. "I have grandchildren. You should have thought of that before you started digging." Wilson slammed the door and moved quickly to the driver's side, the gun now pointed at her across the center console. "Hands where I can see them." Emily placed her shaking hands on her lap as Wilson started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. He drove with one hand, the gun steady in the other. "You should have kept out of this," he said, his voice eerily calm now. "Should have just accepted that David killed himself, like everyone else did. 4 years, Emily. 4 years of peace, and you had to ruin it." "You killed him," Emily whispered, but Wilson heard her. "David killed himself the moment he decided to be a hero. Do you know how many people depended on my practice? Not just employees, their families, their kids' college funds, their mortgages. One sanctimonious doctor was going to ruin the lives of dozens of people." Emily began to cry, tears streaming down her face as Wilson drove faster, leaving the commercial district behind. The familiar streets turned into suburban neighborhoods, then rural roads leading toward Pine Mountain. "He found discrepancies, didn't he?" Emily said through her tears. "In the billing." Wilson's laugh was bitter. "Discrepancies? Such a clean word for it." David couldn't understand that sometimes you have to work the system to keep a practice afloat. Insurance companies deny legitimate claims while their executives get rich. "I was just leveling the playing field by committing fraud, by surviving." Wilson's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. But St. David couldn't see the grey areas. Everything was black and white to him. He was going to report me, destroy everything I'd built, send me to prison for what? For making sure my people could feed their families? The trees grew thicker as they drove, the afternoon sun filtering through the canopy. Emily recognized the area. This was the road to the Sunrise Visitor Center, the same route David would have taken that October morning. "Where are you taking me? Where do you think?" Wilson turned onto a dirt road, the Mercedes bumping over roots and rocks. "Your husband liked to hike, thought the mountain gave him clarity. Let's see if it does the same for you." 20 minutes of terrifying silence passed, broken only by Emily's quiet prayers and the sound of gravel under the tires. Finally, Wilson pulled into a small clearing and shut off the engine. "Get out." Emily's legs nearly gave out as she stood. The forest was quiet, peaceful even, with birds calling in the distance. It seemed impossible that she was about to die in such a beautiful place. "Walk." Wilson gestured with the gun toward a narrow trail leading into the trees. "We're going to take a little hike, just like David did. They'll find you," Emily said, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. "The police know I was with you. My sister knows. Your sister knows you had coffee with an old friend. The police will find your car at the coffee shop and assume you went for a walk to clear your head. Grief does strange things to people. Sometimes they follow their loved ones." He pushed her forward onto the trail, the gun pressed against her back. The trees closed in around them, the afternoon light growing dimmer under the canopy. "Move," Wilson commanded. The forest floor was uneven, covered in fallen branches and roots that caught at Emily's feet. Wilson pushed her forward. Relentlessly, the gun barrel a constant pressure against her spine. Her breathing came in short gasps from both effort and fear. "Keep moving," Wilson ordered, his own breathing heavy. "Don't even think about running. You wouldn't make it 5 feet." Emily stumbled over a thick root, catching herself against a moss-covered tree. The bark was rough under her palms, real and solid in a way that made this nightmare feel horribly real. How many times had David touched these same trees, walked these same paths? They'd gone maybe 50 yards into the woods when the first siren wailed in the distance. Wilson froze, his head whipping around like a startled deer. "No," he muttered. "No. No, more sirens joined the first, growing louder, closer. Emily felt a surge of hope that died quickly when Wilson's hand clamped around her arm. "You called them." His voice was flat, disbelieving. "At the coffee shop. You called the police." The sirens were screaming now, multiple vehicles from the sound of it. Through the trees, Emily could see flashes of red and blue lights. "Damn it!" Wilson yanked her roughly against him, spinning her around to face the direction. They'd come. His arm went around her neck, the gun pressing against her temple. This wasn't supposed to happen. The sounds of car doors slamming echoed through the forest, voices shouting commands, the rustle of movement through the undergrowth. They were surrounding the area. "Dr. Wilson," a familiar voice boomed through a megaphone. Detective Harper from that morning. "This is the police. We have the area surrounded." Let Mrs. Carter go and come out with your hands visible. Wilson backed up against a large Douglas fir, using its trunk as cover while keeping Emily firmly in front of him. She could feel him trembling against her back, his arm tightening around her throat. "Back off," he shouted. "Everyone back off, or I'll kill her. I swear I'll do it." "Dr. Wilson, no one needs to get hurt here," Detective Harper's voice carried clearly through the trees. "Let's talk about this. Let Emily go, and we can work something out." "There's nothing to work out." Wilson's voice cracked. "You don't understand. David was going to destroy everything I built." Emily could see officers taking positions behind trees, weapons drawn but pointed down. They were being careful, professional. A younger officer in tactical gear was moving slowly closer from the left, using the undergrowth as cover. "Stay back." Wilson swung the gun toward the movement, then back to Emily's head. "I mean it. Everyone stay where you are." The standoff stretched out, minutes feeling like hours. Sweat dripped from Wilson's face onto Emily's neck. She could feel his whole body shaking now, the gun wavering against her temple. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he kept muttering. "David should have just taken the money I offered him." Money, did you know that? Enough to travel, enjoy retirement. But no, he had to be noble, had to be righteous. "Dr. Wilson." A new voice called out, male, calm, professional. "I'm Officer Daniel Lee, a negotiator. Can we talk? Help me understand what happened." "What happened?" Wilson laughed bitterly. "What happened is that one sanctimonious doctor decided. He was judge and jury. 15 years of friendship meant nothing to him, nothing." Emily felt Wilson's grip shifting, his agitation growing. The gun moved from her temple to wave at the police, then back again. His movements were becoming erratic, unpredictable. "He had evidence," Wilson continued, almost rambling now. "Copies of everything, bills, records, bank statements. So careful, so thorough, just like always. Said he was going to the FBI that afternoon if I didn't turn myself in." Officer Lee took a slow step forward, hands visible and empty. "Let's talk about this, Doctor. I'm sure there's. Don't come any closer." Wilson's voice rose to a near scream. Panic had taken over completely now. Emily could feel his heart hammering against her back, his breathing ragged. Lee took another small step. It was too much. Wilson made a sound between a sob and a snarl, raising the gun and bringing it down hard against the side of Emily's head. Pain exploded through her skull, white lights dancing across her vision. She cried out, her knees buckling, and suddenly, she was falling. The moment Emily dropped, Wilson's human shield was gone. He looked down at her crumpled form, then at the circle of officers closing in, and made a desperate choice. He turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth deeper into the forest. He made it maybe 20 feet. 2 officers in tactical gear burst from hiding, hitting Wilson from both sides. They went down in a tangle of limbs, Wilson fighting wildly but no match for them. Within seconds, they had him face down in the pine needles, arms wrenched behind his back. "Stop resisting," one officer commanded as they cuffed him. But Wilson kept struggling, kept ranting. "You don't understand. David destroyed everything, my practice, my reputation, my life. He destroyed it all with his righteousness. 40 years of work, gone because one man couldn't mind his own business." Emily held her hand to her bleeding head, the world spinning as EMTs rushed to her. She could hear Wilson still shouting as they hauled him to his feet, pine needles and dirt clinging to his expensive suit. He wouldn't listen, Wilson screamed. "I begged him, offered him money, offered him anything, but he had to be. The hero had to save the world." Well, where did it get him? Where did it get him? The EMTs were gentle, checking Emily's pupils and pressing gauze to the gash on her scalp. "You're going to be okay," one assured her. "Just a nasty cut. We'll get you checked out at the hospital." Through her tears and pain, Emily watched as they dragged Wilson away, still ranting about David, about money, about everything being destroyed. The distinguished doctor she'd known for 15 years was gone, replaced by this wild-eyed stranger, covered in forest debris, spitting accusations at a dead man. Detective Harper knelt beside her as the EMTs worked. "You did good, Mrs. Carter. That 911 call saved your life." Emily nodded weakly, then winced at the pain it caused. Around them, the forest was busy with activity officers, radios crackling, evidence being marked. The peaceful trail had become a crime scene. But Emily was alive, unlike David. She would walk out of these woods. The thought brought fresh tears, but also a grim satisfaction. Wilson had failed. Whatever secrets David had died protecting, Wilson's attempts to bury them had failed. Justice, delayed by 4 years, was finally coming. The fluorescent lights in the police station interview room made Emily's headache worse, but she refused to go to the hospital until she'd given her statement. A butterfly bandage held the cut on her head closed, the EMTs assuring her it wouldn't need stitches. Detective Harper sat across from her, a digital recorder between them, while a younger officer took notes. "Take your time, Mrs. Carter," Harper said gently. "Start wherever you're comfortable." Emily began with the morning's discovery of the backpack, moved through Sarah's revelations at the medical practice, the storage unit findings, and finally Wilson's increasingly erratic behavior. Her voice shook when she described the gun, the drive into the forest, the certainty that she was about to die where David had died. "He kept saying David should have taken the money," Emily said, "that David was going to destroy everything." Harper nodded. "Dr. Wilson is in interrogation room too. Would you like to take a break?" "No, I need to know what happened to my husband." A knock on the door interrupted them. Another detective leaned in, whispered something to Harper that made her eyebrows rise. "Mrs. Carter," Harper said carefully, "Wilson's story is falling apart quickly. Faced with the day planner evidence and your statement, he's talking a lot." Emily's hands clenched in her lap. "What is he saying?" "I'll get the latest update. Officer Williams will stay with you." Harper left, returning 15 minutes later with a grim expression and a thick folder. "Wilson broke down completely," she said, sitting back down. "He's confessed to David's murder." The word hit Emily like a punch. Murder. Not missing, not suicide, not accident murder. Harper opened the folder. According to Wilson, he and 2 accomplices, men who worked at his practice doing what he calls off-the-books jobs, met David at the trailhead that morning. They told David they wanted to discuss a resolution to their misunderstanding, said they could work things out privately. David believed them, apparently. He was wary but willing to listen. Wilson convinced him they just needed to talk. Away from potential eavesdroppers, they followed him up the trail for about an hour, getting him far from any witnesses. Emily closed her eyes, picturing David hiking with those men, probably still hoping for a peaceful solution. He'd always believed in people's better nature. They stopped at a remote viewpoint. Harper continued. Wilson made one last attempt to buy David's silence. When David refused and said he was going to the FBI that very afternoon, Wilson claims one of his accomplices pushed David. But given Wilson's pattern of lies, we suspect he gave the order or did it himself. How? The word came out as a whisper. It was a 200-foot drop onto rocks. Death would have been instantaneous. Harper's voice softened. He wouldn't have suffered, Mrs. Carter. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Harper gave her a moment before continuing. Wilson and his accomplices made it look like David had gone off trail on his own. They damaged the GPS device to prevent tracking, threw the backpack in the river. They thought it would never be found. But why? Emily finally managed. What was worth killing for? Harper pulled out another document. This is where it gets complicated. Wilson has admitted to extensive insurance fraud over the past 15 years. He was billing for procedures never performed, sometimes on patients who had died months earlier. The electronic records were altered to show treatments that never happened. Sarah mentioned he wouldn't let anyone help with the patient transitions, Emily said slowly. He took all the files home. He was covering his tracks. But that's not all. Harper's expression darkened. Wilson was also involved in illegal organ trafficking. He was accepting black market money for organ transplants, using his legitimate practice as a front. He had connections in major cities, a whole network of corruption. Emily felt sick. The man who delivered David's eulogy, who'd praised his integrity, had been running a criminal enterprise behind his healer's facade. David discovered discrepancies during his final weeks, Harper explained. Wilson got sloppy, or maybe David was just that thorough. Financial records that didn't add up, patient files that didn't match billing, unusual deposits. David started investigating quietly, gathering evidence. The attorney, Emily said suddenly. He was consulting about whistleblower protections. He was building a case. Wilson found out he won't say how and tried to buy him off. When that failed, he tried threats. David didn't back down. An officer knocked and entered. Speaking quietly to Harper, Emily watched the detective's face change, a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Mrs. Carter, Harper said gently, Based on Wilson's confession about the exact location, we sent a helicopter to the cliff area. They found remains, Emily's vision blurred with tears. 4 years of not knowing, and now, the remains are lodged between rocks in a ravine. Recovery teams are working to bring him home. I need to prepare you after 4 years of exposure to weather and wildlife. Identification will require DNA testing, and much is missing. Emily nodded, tears flowing freely now. But I can bury him. I can give him a proper funeral. Yes, Harper said softly. You can. Emily wiped her eyes. What about Wilson's accomplices? He's naming names, trying to get a deal. 2 men who worked maintenance at his practice did his dirty work. We have units picking them up now. The FBI is getting involved, given the interstate nature of the organ trafficking. This is big, Mrs. Carter. Your husband uncovered something. That goes beyond just one corrupt doctor. Emily thought about David's final week, the shaking hands Sarah had noticed, the secret attorney visits, the weight of knowledge he'd carried alone. He'd known how dangerous Wilson was but felt morally obligated to stop him. He knew they might kill him, Emily said quietly. That's why he didn't tell me about the meeting. He was protecting me. Your husband was a brave man, Harper said. He could have taken the money, looked the other way. Instead, he chose to do the right thing. He always did, Emily whispered. It's who he was. Later, as Emily signed her statement, she thought about the 2 men she'd lost that day, the husband who died 4 years ago trying to stop a monster, and the illusion of the friend she thought she'd known. Wilson had sat at their dinner table, laughed at David's jokes, played the role of respected physician while running a criminal empire that destroyed lives. But David had seen through the mask, and even knowing the cost might be his life, he'd stood up to corruption. He'd gathered evidence, consulted lawyers, prepared to bring Wilson down properly, legally. He died on the mountain he loved, pushed by men he trusted, but he died with his integrity intact. Emily left the police station as the sun was setting, painting Pine Mountain in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere on that mountain, recovery teams were bringing David home. The not knowing was over. The questions were answered. Her tears came fresh, but mixed with the grief was pride. David had died a hero, even if no one but her would ever know it. He'd sacrificed himself to stop an evil that had hidden behind a healer's mask. She drove home slowly, already planning the funeral. David deserved a proper burial, with full honors, with the truth of his courage finally known. Wilson would face justice, his accomplices would be caught, the network would be dismantled, and David would finally rest in peace, his final battle won.